Good evening, everyone. On behalf of VGH and UBC Hospital Foundation, I'd like to warmly welcome all of you to the 2021 virtual BMO Capital Markets Innovators Challenge. My name is Simi Sara, and you may recognize my voice from CKNW, but for tonight, I am delighted to be your host for this exciting virtual event. Now, one advantage of this format is the ability to welcome guests from anywhere, which I think is so appropriate. While the innovative work that we're going to be seeing is done in BC, each one has the potential to impact healthcare around the world. Now tonight, I'm here on the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish peoples, the Musqueam, Salish, the Tsleil-Waututh peoples, and we are grateful to them and their ancestors for this land on which we live and work. Now, in the next hour, you will hear three fascinating presentations from some of Vancouver Coastal Health's innovative researchers. These groundbreaking pitches were shortlisted by the Vancouver Coastal Health Research Institute and then handpicked by our Innovation Council specifically for this event because they have the potential to be successfully implemented into our healthcare system and ultimately benefit patient care and outcomes. Each project tonight will walk away with $25,000 to accelerate their work thanks to our donors. However, you, our audience, have the opportunity to award one project a total of $50,000 through the Bradshaw Audience Choice Award. So make sure you stay to the end of our program when we announce the winner. Now, in addition to learning about these groundbreaking projects, you will be hearing from an innovator in the life sciences space here in BC. Dr. Carl Hansen is the co-founder and CEO of Abcellera. Now, that's a Vancouver-based technology company that discovered the first monoclonal antibody therapy authorized in North America to treat COVID-19. Most importantly, though, we're here to raise vital funds in support of research and innovation at Vancouver Coastal Health, and you can play a role in supporting medical research here in BC. Throughout the evening, you can donate to support research and healthcare innovation by clicking that Donate Now button on the bottom left-hand side of your screen or in the menu bar on your mobile device. All donations that are made tonight are eligible for a charitable tax receipt. You know, everyone has a story about why our healthcare system is so important to them. For me, it was important to be here tonight specifically because I wanted to do something to support Vancouver General Hospital. For my family, it's the fact that my husband had his life-saving cancer surgery at VGH, and for all the time that we had to spend there, the staff, the patients, the doctors, the nurses, everyone was so exceptional to us that I want to be able to help in any way that I can. Now, you can support the vital work being done in our healthcare system through purchasing tickets for our 50/50 raffle. A link to this can be found in the chat section on the right-hand side of your screen. If you're a mobile device user, the chat section can be found at the top of your screen. To speak more to the impact that your gifts have, here's Angela Chapman, President and CEO of VGH and UBC Hospital Foundation.
The last year has been one filled with rapid changes and an increased need for our healthcare system to be nimble and able to take on unexpected challenges. VGH and UBC Hospital Foundation is the largest philanthropic partner to Vancouver Coastal Health. Supporting innovation in healthcare, your donations improve and save lives. Through funding new technology and state-of-the-art facilities, to recruiting outstanding clinician researchers, to launching pilot programs of care and treatment, our foundation is committed to the best healthcare for all British Columbians. A single brilliant idea can fundamentally transform how we do things. Think of the discovery of insulin by Canada's own Banting and Best. Everyday research advances on our campuses into new drugs to treat and cure diseases, to develop medical devices that repair or provide relief, and to develop new ways of caring for patients to provide more effective and efficient care. Here in Vancouver, our clinician scientists see gaps in care and opportunities to serve patients better. And our foundation wants to play a role with you to encourage and foster the development of the best ideas that emerge, so that together we redefine the boundaries of medicine. Our researchers apply and receive research grants and awards to translate their discoveries into practice. But we know from our foundation's history the powerful kickstart role that philanthropy can play for research to take off and accelerate. Our world-leading researchers, covering traumatic brain injury through prostate and ovarian cancer to spinal cord injury, multiply philanthropic dollars many times over in grants and awards. Philanthropy is linked to every one of Vancouver Coastal Health's research success stories. And that is where you come in. Your support will accelerate new healthcare innovations through the earliest stages of research and development. To our donors, sponsors, and all of you joining us, thank you for your support. At this time, I would also like to thank and recognize the members of the Innovation Council and the Innovators Challenge Committee. They have generously given their time and talent to this year's virtual event, securing funds towards this event and selecting the 3 projects pitching tonight. Thank you. We could not do this without all of you. In preparation for tonight, each finalist has worked with a mentor to develop their pitch. These individuals have rich and diverse experience in pitching and commercialization. We are so fortunate that they have taken time out of their busy schedules to lend their support and expertise. Thanks to Todd Farrell, Betsabé Madani Herman, and Jason Robertson. Thank you to our mentors. And now, we can't wait to show you what might be the next medical breakthrough here in BC. Get ready to learn something new this evening and enjoy. Thank you for supporting innovation in healthcare. Back to you, Simi.
And now for our project pitches. Each researcher's presentation will be followed by questions from our accelerator panel. We have 3 members on our accelerator panel this evening: Neil Fraser, Valerie Lukash, Reshma Chaskar-Mehta. Thank you to our accelerators for your participation this evening. We ask that you pay close attention to how each project will impact and be successfully implemented into our healthcare system. Voting will open following the final presentation. Remember, it's your votes that will award one winner a total of $50,000 in funding. So let's get started. Our first presenter is Dr. Najib Ayas. He'll be presenting his project, a data-driven approach to obstructive sleep apnea.
Thank you for the introduction. My name is Najib Ayas, and I am a clinician scientist at Vancouver Coastal Health. The title of my project is a data-driven approach to obstructive sleep apnea. Our goal is to use digitized sleep signals to predict and prevent cardiovascular disease in patients with sleep apnea. For this presentation, I'm first going to identify the problem, then talk a little bit about our solution, talk about the work that we have already accomplished, and talk about future plans for implementation. Obstructive sleep apnea is a huge public health problem. There are close to 1 billion individuals worldwide who have sleep apnea, and over 4 million Canadians are affected. I guarantee you that everybody in this audience knows somebody with sleep apnea. Patients with sleep apnea have relaxation of the throat and the upper airway muscles that causes episodic asphyxiation as well as low oxygen levels. Low oxygen levels at night are not good. However, what a lot of people don't realize is that sleep apnea puts a tremendous strain on the body as well as the heart, which leads to long-term complications such as cardiovascular disease, including heart attacks and strokes. Sleep apnea triples the risk of cardiovascular disease. The problem is it's difficult for us to predict which patients are at particularly high risk. Characteristic of symptoms of sleep apnea include loud snoring as well as unrefreshing sleep. To diagnose a patient, I will usually send them for an overnight sleep study where I collect an abundance of physiologic information. If the frequency of apneas is above a certain threshold, I will prescribe a CPAP device which the patient uses at night. CPAP is very effective at treating sleep apnea, but a lot of patients have challenges using it, and to be honest, a lot of patients aren't that motivated to use it regularly. The problem is some patients with sleep apnea will have a heart attack or a stroke, especially if they don't use the device regularly. So just to recap, sleep apnea is common. There are more than 4 million Canadians with sleep apnea. In some patients, sleep apnea causes cardiovascular disease. A patient with sleep apnea has about a 15% chance of having a heart attack or a stroke over 10 years. This means that more than 600,000 Canadians with sleep apnea will have a heart attack or a stroke over the next 10 years. The problem is we cannot predict who these patients will be, as the frequency of apneas does not correlate well with cardiovascular risk. We collect a huge amount of information from these sleep studies. However, we only use a small fraction of this to calculate the frequency of apneas. We think that there's a huge opportunity to use the rest of these signals to help identify patients who are at high risk of cardiovascular disease. Our solution is to create a user-friendly prototype software tool that predicts cardiovascular disease from sleep studies. We will leverage the rich physiologic information that we collect already in these sleep studies to identify these high-risk patients, to improve and provide more precise care plans, as well as to prevent cardiovascular disease. This is a 30-second segment of a patient's sleep study. You can see the large amount of data that we collect as part of these studies. However, we only use one of these signals indicated in purple. This is the airflow signal that we use to calculate the frequency of apneas. We ignore the rest of these signals. We want to take a novel approach where we look at characteristics and features of these other signals to determine if they can help us identify high-risk cardiovascular patients. For example, there are certain characteristics of this patient that you might think would put him at a disproportionately high risk. For example, from the bottom circle, you can see that there is a substantial amount of decrements in oxygen levels. From the middle circle, you can see a lot of variability and acceleration of his heart rate. And from the top circle, you can see an intense activation of his brain. This combination of low oxygen levels, high variability in heart rate, and intense EEG or brainwave activation puts a lot of stress on his body and would likely increase his risk of cardiovascular disease. I think that it's also clear from the large amount and the complexity of the data that you can see that we're going to require complex computer analysis tools, including advanced signal processing and machine learning. We believe that our team is set up for success. We have international experts in machine learning and advanced signal processing. We have also established the most comprehensive sleep apnea database in Canada, where we have followed patients for over 10 years. We can identify which patients have had a heart attack or a stroke over this time. Indeed, we have already been started to look at this data and have extracted some promising features from this, as well as started to develop our machine learning models. We are requesting a total of $250,000 of funding that should be enough to complete this project, given that we already have our data collected. Specifically, we will use this funding to complete our feature engineering and finish our machine learning models, to test and validate these models, and also to develop prototype software that can be integrated directly into clinical sleep studies. This will provide a real-time assessment of cardiovascular risks. This knowledge can then be used to develop a more precise care plan with the patient. This is a unique opportunity to support a high-impact project. Cardiovascular disease is the #1 cause of death globally. There are more than 4 million Canadians with sleep apnea. Over 600,000 of them will have a heart attack or a stroke over the next 10 years. Even if this project could prevent a small fraction of those events, it would have a substantial impact. We believe that cardiovascular disease is the low-lying fruit. However, our technology could also be applied to predict and prevent other sleep apnea-related diseases such as cancer, kidney failure, and dementia. In addition, these techniques could also be applied to signals from wearable technologies, which would really increase the scope of our project. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ayas, so much for the great presentation. I just have a brief question to ask you. Could you please explain how your technology would result in savings to the healthcare system? Specifically, what's the percent or number of apnea patients who would otherwise miss being diagnosed with cardiovascular disease without this technology?
I think that's a fantastic question. What we do know is that the economic burden of obstructive sleep apnea is estimated to be approximately $150 billion per year in the United States. And a lot of this is attributable to the associated comorbidities that are caused by sleep apnea, especially cardiovascular disease and stroke. We also know that sleep apnea increases the risk of cardiovascular disease and stroke by a factor of 3. I think that it would be very plausible for us to be able to prevent approximately 50% of those cases through knowledge from the patient, as well as changing their care plans to provide a more precise assessment of their cardiovascular risk so that they can really deal with those cardiovascular risks as well. Reducing the event rate by 50% in these patients would have billions of dollars in savings for the healthcare system over the next 10 years. And I believe that that would be a very conservative estimate.
Thank you, Dr. Ayas, for that presentation. I'm curious to understand what type of incremental training for providers would be required to incorporate these data analytics into current sleep programs.
That's a great question. If we design our software well, we don't think that there would be any additional need for the providers to get substantial increased training. Our hope is that we will be able to provide a very concrete cardiovascular risk assessment in these patients, which can then be integrated very quickly into care. This will probably have to be incorporated by the clinician with other information that he knows about, but in terms of extra training, I don't think that any extra training would be required.
Dr. Ayas, thank you for your very insightful presentation. I was wondering, what are the challenges you foresee in getting this adopted within the healthcare system and by sleep clinics or people leveraging wearables?
Obviously, if we develop this software and it has to be used in the system, there will be a certain cost associated with this. The question is whether this extra cost would be valuable enough to the patients and the providers to justify this. We think that the substantial added information to both the patient and the provider would more than justify what modest cost this would be to the additional sleep studies. For instance, I think that most patients would want to know what their future risk of cardiovascular disease is, especially if you can extract that from data that's already been collected. For example, if I had a patient who had a 15% chance of having a heart attack or a stroke over the next 10 years, I would deal with that patient very differently compared to somebody with a risk of 60% chance over 10 years. So I think that once individuals understand the value of this data, I think that most providers and patients would ask this to be incorporated into their regular sleep studies. Because this is a software product, the actual incremental cost of this would be quite small per sleep study, especially compared to the high costs that we use already in order to actually do the studies.
Wow, what an insightful presentation from Dr. Ayas on obstructive sleep apnea. I find it so fascinating that how we sleep can affect so many other areas of our health. Now, if this project has inspired you to support research and innovation in British Columbia, remember, you can donate by clicking the Donate Now button on the bottom left-hand side of your screen or in the menu bar on your mobile device. Our next presenter is Dr. Ryan Flannigan, who will be presenting on his project, Soft Robotics Nanotech, and the next technological leap of treating erectile dysfunction.
My name is Ryan Flannigan, and I am a sexual and reproductive medicine surgeon here at Vancouver General Hospital. Together with biomedical engineer, Dr. Mohammadi, we are going to tell you how our innovation is going to be paradigm shifting in the treatment of erectile dysfunction, much like the introduction of the magical blue pill we all know as Viagra. Erectile dysfunction has a certain taboo around it. It doesn't make headlines. Men don't talk about it, and yet it impacts 50% of men over the age of 40, 50%. When you think about everything that is important in your day-to-day life, where does your romantic relationship rank? For men with severe ED, it's often too embarrassing to find and date a partner, or it removes a major dimension of connection to their current partners. This isn't just about a simple lack of erection. Every day in clinic, I hear from men about how ED impacts their self-identity, intimacy, and mental health. ED directly affects romantic partners. They're unsure how to be supportive and also need to find ways to cope themselves. This disease negatively impacts both members in the relationship, which is often overlooked and also problematic. Now, currently, there are some options to help men with ED. Viagra revolutionized ED treatment in 1998 and reports $2 billion in sales annually. That's great for patients where Viagra works, but actually, Viagra doesn't work in 40% of men. Numbers-wise, that leaves 1 billion men around the world undertreated. This is a massive problem. And given the stigma around ED, unfortunately, it has been unaddressed. The patients who typically come to my office typically fall into this category of ED where Viagra is ineffective. For these men, if they want an erection, they have to jab their penis with a needle to inject medications in order to get an erection. Or, alternatively, undergo surgery to have a penile implant placed where the technology hasn't changed in nearly 40 years. As a result, 40,000 patients will receive penile implants this year around the world, despite a staggering 300 million men globally who have such severe ED that the only effective treatment option is a penile implant. This means that for every one patient properly treated, about 200 undergo untreated. Let that ratio sink in, 1 in 200. It's quite clear we need to create better and more accessible alternative treatment options for men. We believe that our technology will be the most innovative advance since Viagra. We're going to reduce treatment barriers and address the massive gap in men with severe ED needing better treatment. As a result, our innovation aims to move towards realizing the true market size of $78 billion if all men with severe ED were adequately treated, compared to the present annual penile implant market size of $400 million, which has been dominated by 2 companies. As I mentioned, the technology in this field has been largely stagnant for about 40 years. The current penile implants are not sexy or desirable, as my patients and their partners frequently tell me, and I agree. Current penile implant designs rely on filling empty balloons placed into the penis with a large amount of fluid. Because of this design, a large fluid reservoir and pump is needed to transfer fluid in and out of these penile balloons in order to create erections. Men have to repeatedly pump their scrotum to obtain an erection. It's a buzzkill, and patients find it makes the bedroom mechanical and not spontaneous. This erection does not produce a natural feel or experience, but it's better than no erection at all. The current implant also has increased risk for surgical complications and mechanical failures. So we aim to address these deficits through an innovative approach using soft robotics and nanotechnology. Our goal is to engineer an implant that better replicates natural size and growth of an erection. It will allow men to have an erection like they're 18 years old again and improve sexual satisfaction between them and their partners. The magic of our design was to create a more sophisticated penile balloon. To do this, we used a soft robotic design, meaning that we engineered special shapes inside the balloons that expand both in girth and length with only 1/10 of the fluid, as you can see on the screen. To make things even more exciting, we use our in-house nanotech material that is highly tunable to the precise feel and mechanical properties of a natural penis. This means more penile growth with only a fraction of the volume of fluid. Goodbye to the fluid reservoir and awkward pumping of the scrotum. Hello to a more natural sexual experience. As a result of our intelligent design, instead of the bulky reservoir and manual scrotal pump, it will use a miniaturized electronic pump and a smartphone to operate it. It's more discreet and efficient. You can check a text and produce an erection with a simple left swipe. This device allows men to have a more normal sexual experience. Improved function, texture, and firmness are just a few of the benefits. Our hope is that this will also reduce the stigma and barriers to receive treatment for patients with severe ED. Men will have an improved sense of self, and their relationship satisfaction will be enhanced. Without the large fluid reservoir and scrotal pump, the surgical placement will be much easier and faster, resulting in less hospital resources because patients would go home the very same day as the surgery with less risk of complications. These are all wins. With your support, our solution will be further developed, prototyped, and perform preclinical testing in the next 2 years. To make this happen, we will prototype each of the components and perform functional testing for optimization. Then we'll prototype the entire device and perform further testing prior to applying for regulatory approval and continue to develop our business model to successfully translate our technology back into the clinical space. Listen, it would be great if erectile dysfunction was fixed just with a simple pill. But the reality is that 20% of all men over the age of 40 are going to need our device. By supporting this innovation, you'll be supporting tens of thousands of men in British Columbia and potentially hundreds of millions of men and their partners globally that are currently not receiving adequate treatment and therefore living with this burden of a distressing chronic disease. Our innovation will be paradigm shifting and will pick up where Viagra fell short for the treatment of men with severe ED. Our team is extremely well positioned, with myself as a subspecialist and leading surgeon scientist in ED, and Dr. Mohammadi, an international expert in soft robotics and nanotechnology, coupled with the business development and commercialization support here at UBC. Our technology has a very realistic potential to be widely adopted into clinical care locally, nationally, and globally. And with a large existing and vastly larger potential market size, our innovation is also well positioned to be self-sustainable through commercialization. Thank you very much for the opportunity to tell you about our exciting innovation.
Thank you very much for the great presentation, Dr. Flannigan. I just have a brief question for you. What are the complication rates associated with the existing ED implants? And what would the impact be on patients' willingness to get the procedure or on providers' willingness to provide the implant?
This is a great question. What we know from research in the literature right now is that the complication rates ultimately, over the course of the device lifetime, is somewhere around 40 to 50%, meaning that after 10, 15, 20 years, only 50 to 60% of devices are still actually in working use. Now, this can be due to a variety of different categories of complications. There can be upfront complications due to the placement, and this could be from the fluid reservoir, such as bowel injuries, bladder injuries, vascular injuries. It can be complications such as bleeding or swelling of the scrotum from placement of the scrotal pump, or it can be due to complications of placement of the penile cylinders, such as perforations, etc. All of these things up front are probably around the order of 5 to 10%. Some of them are reversible, but some of them are quite severe. For instance, if there is an infection associated with placement of a device, that means the whole device is going to have to be removed. And if that's the case, there's going to be a lot of fibrosis, and it's going to be much more difficult to replace the device down the road. So if we can get around that by using our technology, so there's less components inserted into the patient, we then mitigate the risk of all of those complications associated with the fluid reservoir and the scrotal pump. And because our device is dynamic, there's going to be less risk of long-term complications such as mechanical failures and erosions of the cylinders through the penis. So ultimately, this is going to be a lot safer for patients. There's going to be much fewer risks, and it's also going to be much easier to place the devices from the technology users like the surgeons, because the surgical time is going to be much faster. So that's going to be easier for them, and it's also going to result in less complications and more safety for the patients.
Dr. Flannigan, thank you for your very insightful presentation. How do you foresee this technology being prioritized within the health system in comparison, for example, to other technologies for life-threatening conditions?
This is an excellent question. It really comes down to the fundamental fabric of our healthcare system. It's always a bit of a struggle and a balance between ensuring access to care and appropriate care for a whole assortment of health conditions. And what we know so far is that our society, individually and collectively, we value things that are both life-saving and quality of life. And treatment of erectile dysfunction is just another example of a quality of life treatment that's essentially important for the well-being of individuals, much like treatment of mental health is extremely important, much like treatment of arthritis and chronic pain and joint replacements is really important, but not necessarily life-saving. So I think it has to arrive at a balance. And I'm hopeful that with this technology, more individuals will get access to care, and we'll be able to streamline this care so it's appropriately placed dollars from our healthcare system, so it's much more efficient with more patients receiving benefit for less dollars ultimately.
Thank you, Dr. Flannigan. A great presentation. Can you describe what would be the potential savings and benefits to the healthcare system per patient and overall of more people being willing to access this therapy in comparison to the traditional standard of care for an average patient with erectile dysfunction?
This is a great question. I think it's important to break it down into two components. One, the healthcare savings per individual patient receiving care compared to the current form of treatment of penile implant. In this particular case, the new model that we're proposing for penile implant surgery would be approximately, we estimate, half the surgical time required to place the device. And these individuals would be going home as a day surgery. So meaning that they get their operation, they stay in recovery for an hour and a half, and then they're able to go home. Compared to the current model right now, where the surgery is an hour to an hour and a half, and they spend a night in hospital. Typically, it costs around $2,000, to my knowledge, for an overnight hospital stay, as well as all the additional resources for a longer recovery room stay. So this will be immediately $2,000 to $3,000 to $4,000 savings just in hospital resource requirement, let alone having less components of the device. It would be our hope that we can produce this device much cheaper than the current models, which are estimated to be somewhere around $10,000. For the second component, from an overall perspective of ensuring access to care for these individuals that are currently not receiving care, this question is really quite complicated to answer, because we have to understand that individuals that are not receiving appropriate care may have higher risk of other comorbidities. Depression's been shown to be 3 times higher for men with erectile dysfunction. So these individuals that have severe erectile dysfunction, not receiving adequate care, are likely much less happy than if they did receive the appropriate care. This may impact their work productivity and contribution to society. And there's been numerous health economics analyses to show that living with chronic disease has a significant cost to our society that can't simply be captured just with numbers with acute treatment. So I think in treating more men, although it accumulates a higher acute cost, over the long run, there is also significant cost savings. So my hope would be that this would be a cost-neutral event.
What an interesting presentation from Dr. Flannigan. It is amazing how quickly robotic technology is developing. Now, if you wish to support even more innovative projects in British Columbia, remember, you can donate by clicking the Donate Now button on the bottom left-hand side of your screen or in that menu bar on your mobile device. Finally, time for our last presenter. It is Dr. Martha J. Ignaszewski, who will present on her team's project, Clinical Application of a Compact, Quantitative, and Inexpensive Opioid Detector.
Thank you for that introduction, Simi. Imagine if I was to tell you about a device that could be available by 2023 that could reduce opioid overdose deaths and emergency room visits by 50%. Imagine if I were to tell you that this device is cheap, scalable, and uses saliva, and has the potential to save the healthcare system up to $2.5 million per year. My name is Martha Ignaszewski, and I'm an addiction, adult, and child and adolescent psychiatrist at VGH. Together with my team of experts, we have developed a novel opioid analyzer that we think has the potential to fundamentally change the way we treat opioid addiction by alleviating suffering, reducing opioid overdose deaths, and saving money for the healthcare system. Now, most of you know that Canada is in the midst of an opioid crisis and that British Columbia has the highest rates of opioid-related deaths. Since the declaration of opioid crisis as a public health emergency 5 years ago, in 2020, BC recorded the deadliest year for opioid overdoses, with over 1,700 British Columbians losing their lives. Put another way, for every single COVID-19 death that occurred in BC in 2020, 2 people died of opioid overdose. Today, another 5 to 6 people will die of opioid overdose, and countless more will be left with permanent medical consequences, such as brain damage. And these deaths are driven by an increasingly toxic drug supply, and drugs like fentanyl make treatment more difficult. Now, many of you may picture the downtown east side when I talk about the opioid crisis, but this is only a fraction of the problem. We know that the opioid crisis affects people across British Columbia from all walks of life and all age ranges. And we have worked with people as young as their early adolescence through their 70s or 80s. These are people that represent our children, our siblings, family members, neighbors, essential workers. And we know that opioid addiction has a broad societal impact. There are medications that are effective for the treatment of opioid use disorder, but there are some problems with the current standard of care. Imagine walking into your doctor's office and saying, "Doc, I want to get sober," only to find out that with some medications, it can take up to 90 days to reach a clinically effective treatment dose. Imagine starting that medication today on the 6th of May, only to require waiting until early August for your opioid withdrawal to be fully treated. And no, opioid withdrawal is not life-threatening, but I have had countless patients tell me that it is so painful and uncomfortable that death would be preferable. With that in mind, it is no wonder that the earliest stages of opioid addiction treatment are associated with high rates of dropout, high rates of ongoing illicit substance use, and high rates of overdose death. This is something that we as addiction providers have really struggled with, balancing that high-risk initial phase of treatment with safety. And one of the major barriers has been our limited ability to accurately assess someone's opioid tolerance because of an ever-evolving and unknown potency of the current drug supply. Enter our device, which has been adapted from existing laboratory technology that to date has only been accessible in highly specialized treatment settings and has required highly specialized personnel to interpret results, which is time-consuming and expensive. Our device will rely on saliva to allow us to measure drug level quickly and wherever we are working with our patients. That is because the device is portable. It is compact and it is inexpensive to use. And it has the potential to change that entire treatment timeline that we talked about, reducing the timeline from months to mere days. We envision that our device has the potential to disrupt current standards of opioid addiction treatment by alleviating patient suffering, helping patients stay in treatment, reducing opioid overdose deaths, and saving money for the healthcare system. Now, we are currently in our second year of development of our project, and to date, we have successfully bioengineered a novel prototype and patented the device. Importantly, this is the first device of its kind on the market, and we have no direct competitors. We are now transitioning into the fine-tuning and validation of the device to make sure that it can accurately detect opioids from all classes and other substances. And from there, we'll transition into the clinical validation through clinical trials, and we will be working on further refinement of the device to improve usability, packaging, and allow for cost reduction. With your support, we are aiming for the widespread clinical distribution of the device by 2023. I hope that I have demonstrated that with reducing delays in accessing life-saving treatment, we have the potential to save lives and save money. We estimate that with only a 50% reduction in only emergency room visits at only VGH, we have a potential savings of $1.7 to $2.5 million per year. And this figure is a likely underestimate of the potential impact because it does not account for the liberation of treatment resources, increased access to hospital beds for other uses, and the reduced medical consequences of illicit and injection drug use. Additionally, we anticipate that this will allow for a four-fold increase in clinic appointments with addiction providers. And perhaps most importantly, we cannot put a price on the alleviation of human suffering and reduction in loss of lives. If successful today, together, we have the tremendous opportunity to revolutionize opioid addiction treatment and to provide a critical push towards solving the opioid crisis. Thank you so much for your time and for your support.
Dr. Ignaszewski, thank you for your very insightful presentation. Have you thought of a pilot rollout solution? And if so, where would you recommend starting one within the BC healthcare continuum?
Excellent question. As mentioned, we are currently working on optimizing the device and scaling it up for the potential rollout. We are starting with the validation of laboratory samples to ensure that the device is working as anticipated. And from there, we anticipate the potential pilot rollout in clinical settings such as the acute medical wards at VGH before expanding the project further into community treatment settings.
Thank you, Dr. Ignaszewski, for that great presentation. What is the potential affordability to the healthcare system to manufacture and deploy such a device compared to the alternative?
Great question. So we anticipate that this device can completely revolutionize opioid addiction treatment. As I've mentioned, that by reducing opioid overdose deaths and emergency room visit by 50%, we have a potential savings of $1.7 to $2.5 million at VGH alone. If we scale that up to emergency room departments and hospitals across BC, Canada, North America, and even globally, we are looking at much higher numbers and helping people stay in treatment. In Canada alone, the opioid use disorder epidemic costs about $6 billion annually. So we have the room for making tremendous changes in care, reducing healthcare costs, and saving lives.
Thank you, Dr. Ignaszewski, for a great presentation. I just have one brief question for you. How many people will be positively impacted by this technology? In particular, what would be the number of patients that would be analyzed that would start early treatment and complete it in BC, and then possibly on the Canadian level, and perhaps even beyond globally? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So in British Columbia alone, there are an estimated 7,000 people with opioid use disorder, and likely there are many more who have been under-recognized by the current healthcare system. And that is true across Canada, North America, and globally, that we have trouble identifying and providing appropriate treatment for people. With our revolutionary device, we will be able to help those people accessing treatment decrease the treatment phase by 90 days, stay engaged in treatment, and we anticipate a 4-fold increase in treatment retention over time. This will allow for reduction in medical illnesses associated with opioid use, as well as provide savings for the healthcare system.
What a thoughtful pitch from Dr. Ignaszewski. It's inspiring to see a potential answer to the number of overdose deaths that we have been seeing in our community. So thank you to all of our researchers for their presentations and our accelerator panel for their insightful questions. Now it's your turn. Take a moment to reflect on each project. Now, these projects were chosen based on how successfully they could be implemented into our healthcare system and ultimately benefit patient care and outcomes. So we encourage you to keep that in mind as voting is about to open. On the right-hand side of your screen, you will see the 3 researchers and their projects listed there. Select the one project that you want to vote for and click the Submit button. You'll be notified once your vote has been submitted. You have approximately 5 minutes to vote. Don't forget, the project with the most votes this evening will take home that Bradshaw Audience Choice Award and a total of $50,000. Voting for your favorite project is only one way, though, to support innovation in healthcare. While we wait for the results, please consider making a donation to support research and innovation at Vancouver Coastal Health. All of the donations that are made tonight are eligible for a full charitable tax receipt. The presentations this evening show the power that innovation can have on patients. Now, while you're voting, we would like to take the opportunity to thank our sponsors right now. Thank you again to all our event sponsors. Don't forget, you can also purchase your 50/50 raffle tickets through the link in the chat box now. A reminder for mobile device users, that chat section can be found at the top of your screen. So while our team works to confirm the votes, we would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Carl Hansen, the co-founder and CEO of Abcellera, a Vancouver-based technology company that discovered the first monoclonal antibody therapy authorized in North America to treat COVID-19. We are grateful to have Carl here with us tonight to speak.
Hi, I'm Carl Hansen, founding CEO of Abcellera. Paul Geyer invited me here tonight to say some words about biotechnology entrepreneurship, or entrepreneurship in general. That's something that I have learned a little bit about over the past few years in helping to build Abcellera from what was a very humble beginning, 5 co-founders in a single office based on my academic research at UBC, to what is now a company of 230 people, mostly focused here in Vancouver, and Canada's largest, or at least Canada's most valuable biotechnology company. Abcellera was founded based on the idea that long-term investments in technology, in teams, and in people, coupled with a business model that emphasizes collaboration and working with others to make the pie bigger, could transform the way that drug development is done. We started the company with a lofty goal of helping to improve the way that antibody therapeutics are developed, and to do that by building a full stack solution that allows you to go from an idea to a therapeutic molecule that can be tested in people. That effort has resulted in a full stack antibody discovery engine that allows us to search, decode, and analyze natural immune systems to find those rare antibodies that have the properties that make them suitable for the development of therapeutics. Instead of developing our own drugs, as is typical in the biotechnology industry, we have set up a centralized model where we allow the entire industry to access our capabilities through partnerships. We take their drugs internally, we work to find the best molecules that can go into clinical development, and we send those back to our partners, where they then take them through clinical trials and, when successful, ultimately to approval as new therapies to help patients. We set up those deals to align their success with our success, and also with the benefits to patients that we're trying to serve ultimately in this industry. Over the past 8 years, we have worked on or signed up to do over 100 therapeutic antibody development programs that touch areas which include cancer, autoimmune disease, inflammation, neurodegenerative disease, and infectious disease. It was last year, last spring in fact, that Abcellera entered the spotlight as we had the opportunity to prove out the power of our technology and also our collaborative business model in developing a new antibody therapy that could respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. Starting from a single blood sample in March, we were able to search through millions of cells and identify a very rare antibody that was exceptionally potent at blocking the virus and stopping it from infecting cells. That antibody, bamlanivimab, moved into clinical trials on June 1st, which is a world record in speed in the development of therapeutic antibodies, and has since been approved, granted emergency use authorization in 15 countries, including the US and Canada. As of today, bamlanivimab has been used to help over 400,000 people in the US alone, and we believe that that therapy in under a year has helped to save many thousands of hospital visits and thousands of lives. I believe that's an example of what can be achieved when you take a long view on the development of technologies that solve big problems within the industry. Based on that success and the larger number of programs that we have with our partners, Abcellera graduated from a private company here in Vancouver to a publicly traded company in December. On December 11th, we listed on the NASDAQ, raising $555 million US, the largest ever Canadian IPO, and we are now Canada's largest and most valuable biotechnology company. That accomplishment, when you think back to the humble beginnings, is quite surreal. I really get the sense of a parent who wakes up one day and their kids that were small and that you were helping to find their way in the world have suddenly gone off to college, and they're off in the world doing big things. That analogy, I think, is apt because I was asked to provide some advice on starting companies, or at least some lessons learned, and it occurred to me that any specific advice that I were to give you is likely wrong. The first thing to know about companies and success is that there is no formula. Every company is idiosyncratic. Every person, every entrepreneur is different. Every market is different. The conditions are different. And the best you can do is react, make plans, and use your best judgment to move your venture forward. That doesn't mean, however, that there's nothing that can be said. I think there is some general good advice that you could offer to people that are about to embark on that journey, in the same way that you could offer your kids some good advice when they're thinking about their careers or when they're learning how to find their way and navigate throughout the world. So I wanted to share with you 5 pieces of advice that I think are ubiquitous and apply to every venture. The first one is to be bold. It is true in Canada that we have a remarkable system of universities, that we have a very talented workforce, that we excel in many of the core disciplines that you need to build a biotechnology company or a modern technology company. Things like genomics, things like cell biology, immunology, and computation. Despite that basis of strength, it is also true that over the past 2 decades, Canada has been falling behind in innovation, in turning great ideas and great science and the engine of our workforce into companies that scale, that last, that create jobs, that create economic prosperity, and that bring new products to the world that help to relieve suffering or save lives. I think the biggest reason for that is not a lack of talent, and it's not a lack of capital. It's more a lack of thinking big. If you are to start off a venture, the bigger the goal, the more easy it will be to attract to that venture the resources and the people that you will need to persist long enough to scale that company and actually have an impact in the world. Abcellera is an example that this can happen here in Canada, and there are many other examples both locally and across the country. So when you start your companies, don't think small, think big. The second piece of advice I wanted to offer was that it is so important to do your own thinking. There are many formulas these days about starting companies, that you should go out to the market, that you should ask people, that you should talk to key opinion leaders, and you should somehow create your business model by consensus. I would take the contrarian view that if everyone believes something's a good idea, it probably isn't. The things that are obvious are the things that everyone is doing, and you'll find that as you do that, it is not fresh and it is not new, and there's competition, and it's difficult to build a good business that way. Rather, a good business idea is the combination of what is new, a new insight or a secret that has been missed, combined with something that is also true. If you can find something that is new and that is true, you've got the opportunity to do something original in the world and to build a company that will last. For us, that insight was that in order to build a company of scale and to have impact on drug discovery, you don't need to develop your own drugs. After starting the company in 2012, like any company that exists in the biotechnology sector, someone was coming to us every month asking us, when are you going to start your own drug development programs? And insisting that that's the only way to build a company that will ultimately be valuable. We saw it differently. We believed that if everyone was doing that, it made sense to go the other direction, to focus on the technologies at the front end of drug discovery, and then to make those available to the entire ecosystem so they wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel every time. And by stripping out the redundancy, we believe that we could help those companies to move more quickly and to ultimately get better therapies to patients faster. That's a business model that no one liked in the early years, but as it started to work and take off, it was the single thing that all the investors liked as we went towards the IPO. So the lesson there is to look at things differently, try to be biased towards a contrarian view, and trust your own judgment about what makes sense in building a business. The third bit of advice is about hiring people. It's a long-held cliche that it's all about the people, and that's absolutely true. A company is nothing more than the combination and collection of the talents and the energy and the skills of the people that you hire. And the people that you hire first into your company will define the entire culture and the entire way of working for that company for years to come. When starting a company early, you'll find there's a temptation to look for the people that have done it before, the people that can give you the easy answers, and the people that give you some credibility with outside investors. My advice would be to avoid that temptation. Focus instead on finding those people that are intelligent, that are motivated, that believe in the vision, and most of all, that work well together. Hire the people instead of the CVs, and what you will find is that over time, if you give these people enough leeway to work on the business, they will quickly acquire the skills that they need for their roles. You'll wake up one day and you'll have a wonderful workforce that started with low experience, but terrific hustle and terrific talents, and you'll end up with a combination of both. And that's a great way to build a company. The fourth bit of advice is to run towards the really hard things. When you're building a business, you'll find there's many obstacles, and it's easy to try to find a way around them and to take the short path. Instead, look at it from the other direction. If you see that there's a big problem in the world and that it's a hard problem to solve, that it takes time, it takes organization, it takes money, then if you solve that problem, you will find that you have built something of value. It's valuable only because it was difficult to do, and when you do it, you'll find that you're in a position to defend your position in the industry, and that you'll have a competitive advantage that will last. For us, that difficult thing was in not focusing on one part of the antibody discovery process, but rather taking a business model that embraced owning every part of the process from concept right through to the development of the composition of matter and the actual antibody therapeutic that could go into clinical testing. That has so far required that we spend 9 years and many tens of millions of dollars on research and development, and we expect that it will take another 10 years to complete that effort, building up manufacturing capabilities and translational science. And as we continue to build that and invest in ways to do it at scale, we will be in a position to help the industry move more quickly, bring therapies to patients faster, and ultimately create value for our partners and for patients. I want to emphasize the importance of playing the long game. Building a company that is meaningful will take much longer than you expect. And what is absolutely true is that what you believe you can achieve in a year or two is probably an overestimation, but what you aim to achieve in a decade is normally far below what is actually possible. That's because in business, as in life, you get compounding returns on your investments. You start to build a brand, you start to build technology, you start to be able to attract more resources. And the longer that you can persist, the more likely it is that you will be successful. So in taking financing, in hiring people, in thinking about your business model, imagine what the company will be not a year from now or not 5 years from now, but a decade from now or 20 years from now. And if you do that, you'll be playing a completely different game from the competition. And then your problems shifts from competing for a quick success to figuring out how to last and endure in the market. Lastly, I just wanted to express to you my enthusiasm for the opportunity that sits before us all in this sector of biotechnology. We have, over the last 20 years, been the beneficiaries of some tremendous advances in the underlying tools and technology that help us to explore biological systems. Things like high-throughput genomics, computation, molecular biology, PCR are all inventions that are foundational and things that have happened within our own lifetimes. These have created an immense opportunity to start to build companies and to find new secrets and develop new products that can help to make the world a better place and can help us to keep people safe, to extend the quality and the duration of lives. That's a wonderful place to work, one that is inherently meaningful, and one where we are likely to see some of the real economic drivers that we hope will happen here in Vancouver and here in Canada. I want to thank everyone for joining tonight. This is a terrific event. We thank you for your patronage and your support. And to those entrepreneurs, thank you for taking a chance and putting yourself out there tonight, and good luck.
Thank you, Carl, for that wonderful insight. It is such a pleasure to have you speak for us. We just heard from 3 revolutionary pitches that have the potential to impact our healthcare system, as well as insights into one of Vancouver's own innovative companies creating impact all over the world. Now, there's still time to donate. Your generosity will support our hospitals and our medical teams to accelerate the process of testing, adopting, and implementing leading healthcare innovations. All donations made tonight are eligible for a full charitable tax receipt. Every gift matters, no matter the size. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this evening. And now I'll hand over to Angela Chapman to reveal the winner of our Bradshaw Audience Choice tonight. You will need to select the join button that will appear on your screen to hear the announcement of the winners. Thank you.
Thank you, Simi, for hosting this event tonight. And thank you, Carl Hansen, for serving as our speaker this evening and being so inspirational with your story of innovation. As you have seen tonight, innovations are born out of everyday real-life challenges that our clinician researchers see in their patients and in the population, in the health of our population. These ideas truly have the ability to save and improve lives, improve our healthcare system, and transform healthcare for all British Columbians. Our sincere thanks to Dick and Val Bradshaw for your generous donation to establish the Bradshaw Audience Choice Award. And with that, I am delighted to announce, I'm pulling out the envelope, the voting is in, and the winner is Dr. Ignaszewski and her team and their solution to the opioid crisis. Congratulations to our 2021 Bradshaw Audience Choice Award winner. Thank you to all of our researchers for participating tonight. You will all go home with $25,000 in project funding, thanks to our Jumpstart Prize donors from Paul Geyer and a number of other anonymous donors to that prize this evening. Your donations help fuel innovation in healthcare. Our foundation sees the amazing work that our researchers do every day, the problems that they identify, and we want to be the fuel that sets them in a direction of solving those healthcare problems. So far tonight, we've raised an incredible $177,000, and we continue to count those donations coming in. Thanks to everyone who has already donated. And you can still help grow that total. You can continue to purchase the 50/50 raffle tickets by selecting the link in the chat section. A reminder for our mobile device users that the chat section can be found at the top of your screen. The jackpot is currently $7,850. Buy your tickets. We hope you have enjoyed this incredible evening. I hope you've been inspired by our clinician researchers and the problems that they're trying to solve, and witness the power of philanthropy, how we can work together to create that spark and push for healthcare innovation here in BC. We would appreciate your feedback on this event by completing the link in the chat box. Thank you everyone for being here this evening with us, and we wish you a very good night, and congratulations again to our winner and to our researchers. Thank you and good evening.